Welcome back to the Wonders of Creation classroom series. When we think about the variety of life on Earth, we likely think about the larger animals, those that we see and encounter in our everyday life. Insects and spiders are often considered pests, those small creatures that annoy us, buzzing in our ears, leaving itchy bites, making cobwebs in dark corners. But if we were to think about all the diversity of life, it is estimated that around 80% of all animal species are in the phylum of arthropods. Insects, spiders are part of that. And on top of that, if we were to simply combine the total amount of biomass of all arthropods on Earth versus all humans on Earth, the arthropods would weigh over 16 times more massive than the 8 billion people. Isn't that amazing? But from all of these multi-legged, segmented-bodied exoskeleton creatures, we have in today's class some exciting examples of God's design seen as wonders in His creation. So let's start out with one of the most recognizable insects in the world, the honeybee. This buzzing little insect can be found on every inhabited continent with over 20,000 different species. This little insect is extremely important as one of the most common pollinators for crops and food that humans depend on. But specifically, when we think about bees, we probably think about the honeybee. Who hasn't enjoyed some sweet honey with your meal or on your dessert? The honeybee is one of the most effective pollinators, working out from a central hive to pollinate plants 3 and 5 miles away. But what happens when one bee finds a good area of flowers to pollinate? How does that bee direct the rest of the hive? Let's let Kyle Butt tell us about the amazing communication of the honeybee.
Honeybees are extremely important to our environment. They pollinate plants that provide humans with wonderful food, such as tasty fruits and vegetables. But have you ever wondered what happens when one bee finds a group of flowers that are full of great pollen for honey? Can the bee tell the other bees in the hive how to find the flowers? It can't draw a map. It can't talk about how to get there. So what does it do? Well, God gave the honeybee a remarkable way to communicate without using words. A worker bee that finds pollen and nectar brings them back to the beehive and passes the food to the other bees. And as the other worker bees taste the food, the bee that brought the food performs a very special dance. If the food is very far away, which normally it is, the bee does what is called the waggle dance. During the dance, it makes sounds with its wings, and the amazing thing about the dance is that it tells the other bees exactly where the food source is. The bee uses the sun as a reference point. If the bee dances in a straight line to the right, then the food is directly to the right of the sun. If the bee dances straight up, then the food is straight toward the sun. If the bee dances down the honeycomb, then the food is directly away from the sun. Furthermore, the sounds that the bee makes using its wings as it waggles its body from side to side help the other bees know how far away the food is and exactly where to find it. As you may know, the sun constantly changes its position in the sky. It moves about 1 degree to the west every 4 minutes. It just so happens that the bees understand the sun's movement and they change their dance to the other bees to help them find food as the sun moves. This remarkable dance language couldn't have evolved. Codes and languages such as this, they must have been programmed into the bees by an intelligent programmer, an intelligent designer. Not only does the bee dance show other bees the way to food, but it shows humans that there is an awesome creator and designer who gave the bees this astonishing way to communicate. And that designer is God.
We're familiar with how larger animals like dogs and cats or horses and cows, how they communicate. Their barks and howls, whinnies and moos are obvious means for them to communicate to other creatures. But as Kyle explained for us, even small creatures like honeybees have been designed with some amazing communication traits. Now, when you think about bees, one of the first things you might have thought about is the bee's defense mechanism, their sting. If threatened, the bee can use its stinger to inject venom and defend the hive. Several insects have this same stinging ability, but there's one insect defense mechanism that's a little more rare. With about 40% of all insect species being beetles, it might seem that beetles are pretty common creatures, but don't be fooled. Some of these beetles have some remarkable design features, especially the bombardier beetle. Here's Lyons to tell us about this special little insect.
Scientists estimate that 4 out of every 10 species of insects are beetles, including click beetles, dung beetles, rhinoceros beetles, ladybugs, boll weevils, and my favorite, lightning bugs, or as some people call them, fireflies. Those little guys have built-in bioluminescent flashlights. How cool is that? In one sense, beetles are a common bug. That is, they're commonly seen creatures. But don't think of them as unremarkable animals. Beetles do some exceptional things that testify to a grand designer. Consider the bombardier beetle, which has a kind of bomb in its belly. The bombardier beetle doesn't have explosives tied to its back. It doesn't carry around a miniature stick of dynamite. Its insides are not full of nitroglycerin. No, this little bug has tiny glands inside its body that produce 2 harmless chemicals, known as hydroquinones and the more familiar hydrogen peroxide. The bombardier beetle secretes these chemicals into a kind of holding area or storage tank. Then, if the beetle senses danger and is agitated by an attacker, it quickly moves the chemicals from its storage tank into yet another chamber, which could be called the explosion chamber. The beetle secretes special catalyst enzymes into the once harmless chemical mixture, making a toxic spray that reaches 212 degrees Fahrenheit, or 100 degrees Celsius. That's right, the temperature at which water boils. So amazing and effective is this bomb-making abilities of the bombardier beetle that scientists have sought for several years to learn all they can from its intricate design features. In fact, researchers admit that understanding this beetle better could lead to significant advances in combustion research. Amazingly, when the bombardier beetle bombs away, it doesn't blow up. It doesn't develop a high fever and die. The noxious spray doesn't eat through the chamber walls and kill the beetle. No, the beetle sizes up its attacker and quickly rotates 2 rear nozzles at the end of the explosion chamber so that they point in the precise direction of the attacker. The bombardier beetle then fires the boiling hot mixture toward the enemy with pinpoint accuracy in a high-speed, rapid-fire, machine gun-like fashion at about 500 rounds or pulses of toxic spray per second. Years ago, Time magazine described the defense system of the bombardier beetle as extraordinarily intricate, a cross between tear gas and a Tommy gun. They noted how the special fluid of the beetle is pumped through twin rear nozzles, which can be rotated like a B-17's gun turret to hit a hungry ant or frog with bullseye accuracy. A few years later, Science magazine published an article by Jeffrey Dean and his colleagues who highlighted the fact that the ejection system of the beetle shows basic similarity to the pulse jet propulsion mechanism of the German V-1 buzz bomb of World War II. Evolutionists allege that this amazing insect is the product of millions of years of evolution. Can you imagine the evolution, really, of the bombardier beetle? If this theory were true, then there had to have been a time when the bombardier beetle did not produce a toxic spray. There had to have been a time when it did not store a 212-degree mixture. There had to have been a time when it had never shot anything out of its back end as hot as boiling water. If so, what would have happened the first time the beetle somehow mixed a boiling hot solution without already having a storage tank in place that could withstand such temperatures? What would have happened the first time this beetle ever blew a bomb out of its back end? Why did the beetle not blow up the first time it ever created a bomb? Do you really think that the bombardier beetle just evolved by chance over millions of years? Or does common sense not call for a creator who made this incredible insect with all of its necessary parts in place at the same time at creation.
This little beetle is truly remarkable. The bombardier beetle has such an amazing and complex system of parts for its defense mechanism. Each part of the system, from the various internal organs, the chemicals produced, and the ability to eject the hot spray, is part of an irreducibly complex system. As Eric pointed out, if the beetle was missing any of these components, then the system simply doesn't work. It does no good. It is good that God's design doesn't rely on random chance mutations. Otherwise, we would never have the bombardier beetle. But Eric also mentioned another exciting insect that produces an impressive chemical reaction within its body. Sometimes called fireflies or lightning bugs, this little insect is not a fly or a true bug, but is classified as a beetle, having chewing mouthparts and wings. If you live or have visited a more humid area, then you may have seen them on summer nights, flying and flickering about. How does the lightning bug produce its characteristic flashes? Let's let Eric Lyons illuminate us on this wonder of creation.
One form of light we're using more in the 21st century involves chemical reactions. You've probably seen this kind of light in the form of glow sticks or light sticks. People like them so much because they produce light without heat, and they look pretty cool too. People use them for all sorts of things. Once when I was staying at a hotel and the electricity was off for a few hours, guests were provided glow sticks so that we could make our way around in the dark. Some seem to overlook the fact that this capability is nothing new. Man did not invent this kind of chemical light. It's been here since the creation of lightning bugs and other bioluminescent creatures. Lightning bugs, also called fireflies, are little beetles that carry their own flashlights. How cool is that? These insects have special chemicals called luciferin and luciferase, which they combine with oxygen to form a bright, heatless light. The process is called bioluminescence, the emission of light from living organisms. For years, scientists have studied fireflies and other bioluminescent creatures in hopes of learning how to produce better, heatless chemical light. They've been somewhat successful, but they confess that the light from fireflies and certain other creatures is still many times more efficient than what they can produce in laboratories. The more scientists learn about the firefly, the more amazed they are at its complexity. Sadly, many of these same individuals believe that the firefly somehow evolved over millions of years by time, chance, and mindless random mutations. They dismiss the obvious fact that complex functional design demands a designer. To borrow the words of the Apostle John, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Friends, the next time you see a firefly in your backyard, take a moment to ponder on its marvelous ability and, more important, on its mighty, majestic maker.
When we think about light, we probably first think about the sun, moon, or stars. Or maybe light from fires or candles, or maybe when we turn on the light switch in our homes. But nature is also full of life that creates its own light. Fish under the sea, glowworms in caves, and flying insects like the lightning bug. But isn't what Eric said amazing? That these little insects are more efficient at producing their light than any method humans have designed to create our light. Future engineers, maybe yourself, ought to look at what God has already designed in nature to give us some good inspiration for future designs. And speaking of trying to copy nature, our next creature may not be an insect with 6 legs. Instead, our 8-legged friends, the spiders, have mastered the production of strength and flexibility. All spiders produce silk and can even produce different variations depending on what it is that they're going to use it for. But is spider silk really that impressive? If evolution is true, then spider silk production was an accident, a genetic mutation. If this were true, why would modern researchers be excited to try to reproduce an accident. Eric will help us untangle this evolutionary tale to truly show God's design at work.
To the average person, a spider's web looks very weak and flimsy, as well as perhaps a little creepy. With the greatest of ease, a person can destroy a web, especially if he's not scared of spiders. So why are scientists so awestruck by the spider's silk webbing? Scientists are fascinated with spider silk because it has the amazing capacity to absorb a strong impact. Think about it. Spider silk is much, much smaller and lighter than the flies and grasshoppers that often fly full speed into a spider's web. Yet the web doesn't break. It stretches, but it doesn't break, at least not usually. Spider silk can stretch 30% farther than the stretchiest known nylon and 40% beyond its original length without breaking. Some spiders' webs are so strong, in fact, that they can even catch small birds, such as hummingbirds. Yes, some spiders will catch and even eat birds. Although it may not seem strong and tough from the vantage point of a human being who can easily tear down a spider's web, pound for pound, the silk from certain kinds of spiders is 5 times stronger than steel and is twice as strong as the material that currently makes up bulletproof vests. Due to its amazing strength and stretchiness, it's been said that you might be able to trap a jumbo jet with spider silk that is the thickness of a pencil. To top it all off, the silk from spiders is waterproof. Spider silk is made up of chains of amino acids, protein, an arrangement that is responsible for the silk's amazing strength. Can you imagine how useful it would be if we could produce our own spider silk? Since harvesting silk from spiders is not very practical, scientists have attempted to make artificial spider silk that could be used in anything from bridge cables to airbags and from non-tear sports jerseys to artificial tendons. We could make soft, lightweight, bulletproof vests for policemen, vests that would absorb more impact than current ones. How have scientists fared so far? Although they've made some progress, one scientist admitted that despite years of research, artificial webbing can't even come close to equaling the amazing qualities of spider-produced silk. Sadly, this same scientist believes that spiders just evolved the capacity to spin silk. Are we to believe that the mastermind behind the light, stretchy, shock-absorbing, tougher than steel, better than anything man-made spider webbing is undirected, accidental evolution? Common sense says no way. Obviously, if scientists must spend countless hours trying to design a way to reproduce spider silk, it's unreasonable to conclude that the natural silk which spiders make is a product of random mutations and millions of years. Spider webbing is God's wonder material. That is, the great architect designed these arachnids with the amazing ability to weave mighty webs, which in turn testify to the spider's almighty creator.
In some respects, what Eric talked about almost sounds like a superhero story, like Spider-Man or Superman, but nature is actually where some superhero stories gain their inspiration, and it isn't just a story. A spider's silk production is one of those abilities that defies an evolutionary origin and demands a beyond nature designer in God. Now, for our last life form of today's class, we're going to venture away from the animal kingdom and actually consider a plant. Now, the relationships between plants and insects are often very important to a host of other life in whatever ecosystem they're in. So let's let Kyle Butt introduce us to and show us why the stinking corpse lily is a plant we should be interested in.
Maybe you think plants are boring. I mean, after all, how exciting can they really be? Well, hold that thought while I introduce you to one of the most amazing living organisms in the world, the Rafflesia arnoldi, also known as the stinking corpse lily. So what's so amazing about this plant, you might ask? Well, first, it has the largest flower of any plant in the entire world. The flower can grow to be 3 feet across, and it can weigh 20 pounds. Now, 20 pounds is about 5 pounds more than the heaviest bowling ball you've ever seen. But this flower doesn't grow on a stem with leaves like other flowers. The Rafflesia is a parasite plant, and it grows inside of a vine called a tetrastigma vine. And that vine is a relative to the grape. And when a Rafflesia flower first pops out of the vine, it looks like a pale cabbage plant. But then it spreads 5 large petals that are a fleshy red color with raised white speckles or dots. So probably you want to know why it's called the stinking corpse lily. Well, the huge flower gives off a horrible odor that smells literally like a dead animal. The red petals dotted with white speckles are supposed to resemble rotting meat with maggots on them. This disgusting disguise draws carrion flies and beetles to the flower, and they're searching for food. They're thinking something is dead, and they show up and they shuttle inside the flower and they're looking for a meal, only to discover that there's no meal there. But as they're walking around on the flower petals and in the flower, the pollen of this huge blossom attaches to the bugs, and they spread that pollen to other Rafflesia flowers. And this pollinates the flowers. And after the pollination, a single stinking corpse lily can produce over 4 million seeds. And some of those seeds are carried on the feet of squirrels or maybe an elephant or another animal. And when those seeds find a tetrastigma vine, they begin to grow and start the process all over. The Rafflesia arnoldi is a very rare flower, and it's only found in the rainforest in Sumatra and Borneo. And this huge flower only blooms for about 1 week. So if you get to see one, you are very lucky. In the Bible book of James, we read in chapter 1, verse 11, that men's lives are like flowers. They blossom for a short time and then they fade or vanish away, just like the Rafflesia bloom. The amazing design of this plant, it can't help but show us God's power and His creativity. And the brevity of its flower can help us understand that we should use our short lives on this earth to bring glory to our amazing Creator.
Why are flowers colorful? And why do some flowers smell so sweet? Well, it's a design element to attract the right set of insects in their environment. But in some environments and for some insects, beautiful colors and sweet smells, that's not the right design. Kyle helped us see a curiously designed, massive, smelly, parasitic plant that has the perfect attraction for the insects in its tropical environment. All right, it is now time for you to show what you've learned about insects, spiders, and one interesting plant that attracts them. Let's see what you've learned today. Our first question: what is the reference object for a honeybee's communication dance? If you remember, the bee uses various moves as it communicates by wiggling and buzzing, but its moves use the reference point of the sun. As it directs the hive to where it found pollen, it gives instructions in reference to the sun's position, taking into account that the sun's position changes through the day. How amazing. All right, our second question comes from that amazing explosive beetle. Is the bombardier beetle's spray kept in its body like a venom, or is it mixed only when threatened? All right, different than honeybees that have a venom gland and sac to hold the chemical, bombardier beetles produce their explosive defense by mixing 2 chemicals when they're threatened. And they release the hot, caustic mixture almost instantaneously upon mixing those chemicals. The third insect we discussed today was the lightning bug. So our third question is the flash produced by the lightning bug hot light or heatless light? You know, oftentimes in chemistry, we can produce light by burning chemicals or by mixing certain chemicals that give off large portions of both heat and light. But the lightning bug's reaction is sometimes called heatless or cold light because it's so efficient that practically no heat is released in the reaction. All right, question number 4. Our fourth creature, we left insects and looked at spiders. So here's the question. Pound for pound, what is spider silk stronger than? A spider's web can be 1,000 times thinner than a single human hair. So it may seem like it's not going to be that strong. But if you had 1 pound of spider silk thread and 1 pound of steel thread, the spider silk would be much stronger. All right, our final creature wasn't an animal at all, but a plant that attracts insects. So my question for you, does the stinking corpse lily attract insects to eat them or to be pollinated? You know, there are some crazy carnivorous plants in the world, but the stinking corpse lily does not consume the insects, but it attracts them in order to be pollinated. It only smells like rotten meat. It doesn't eat it. And it's parasitic, which means it grows off the nutrients of another plant, so it doesn't have to consume insects. In terms of sheer quantity and diversity, arthropods, like insects and spiders, far outnumber any other animal phylum, and their biomass is far greater than even humans. However, when we recognize that God designed every creature in nature and that He created all the kinds of life we have during the creation week, then we also understand that all of these amazing animals, from the largest sea creatures to the smallest insects, are here to support the pinnacle of God's creation, you. There's only one form of life God created in His image, and that's humans. So let's study nature, learn from its designs, be good stewards of its use, but let's place the highest value on each other.